His phone rang at 11:07 on a Friday night. The caller ID read CEO Whitmore, the woman from the 34th floor, the one who called him Watson last week while he fixed her air conditioning, never once looking up from her laptop. Now her voice cracked through the speaker, stripped of its boardroom coldness. "Can you come get me?" He locked the door. Wade glanced at his 7-year-old daughter, asleep on the worn sofa in the basement maintenance room, her small hand still clutching a crayon. Sloane Whitmore owned this entire building. She signed his paychecks without knowing his name, and now she was calling him the invisible man who unclogged toilets and replaced light bulbs, begging for rescue. He heard it then. Fists pounding on a door somewhere behind her voice, a man shouting words he couldn't make out. Wade lifted Penny into his arms, grabbed his keys. "Just one night," he said into the phone. He didn't know yet that one night would teach him everything he thought he knew about locked doors, and who really holds the keys. The basement maintenance room smelled like motor oil and old coffee. Wade had worked in this building for 6 years, knew every crack in every ceiling tile, every temperamental faucet, every elevator that groaned on cold mornings. He could navigate all 40 floors blindfolded. But the people who walked those floors barely knew he existed. They stepped around him in hallways like he was a piece of furniture. They called him maintenance guy, or hey you, or sometimes nothing at all, just pointed at whatever needed fixing and went back to their phones. Sloane Whitmore was no different. Worse, maybe, because she was the one who owned it all. The nameplate on her door said CEO. The building itself bore her family name. Last Tuesday, Wade had spent 40 minutes in her office repairing an air conditioning unit that kept clicking. She had been on a video call the entire time, discussing quarterly projections and market shares. And when he finished and said the unit was fixed, she had looked up for exactly 2 seconds, said, "Thanks, Walter," and returned to her screen. His name was Wade. He had worn a name tag that day. Penny stirred on the sofa, her drawing pad sliding off her lap. She came to the building with him on nights when his mother couldn't babysit, which was more often now that her arthritis had gotten worse. He had set up a little corner for her in the maintenance room, the old sofa from a renovated conference room. A lamp that still worked despite its crooked shade, a basket of crayons and coloring books. She drew pictures while he worked. Tonight she had been sketching the building again, the way she always did, each window a little yellow square. 40 floors of tiny yellow squares. Wade looked at the drawing and felt something tighten in his chest. His daughter saw magic in this place. All he saw was a paycheck that barely covered rent. The phone call changed everything. He had almost ignored it, assuming it was a misdial or some after-hours emergency about a clogged toilet. But something in the way the phone kept ringing, insistent, desperate, made him answer. And then her voice. He had never heard Sloane Whitmore sound like anything other than controlled, cold even. The kind of voice that gave orders and expected them followed. But tonight, she sounded like glass about to shatter. "Can you come get me?" He locked the door. Behind her words, he heard the pounding, the shouting, a man's voice, muffled but angry. Wade's hand tightened around the phone. He knew that sound. He had heard it through walls before, in the apartment complex where he grew up, in the places where women learned to speak in whispers and flinch at footsteps. "Where are you?" he asked. "I'll send you the address. Please." He's going to break through. Wade looked at Penny, peaceful in sleep, and felt the weight of a choice he didn't ask for. This woman had never treated him like a person. She didn't know his name, didn't know he had a daughter, didn't know he existed beyond the problems he fixed. But 4 years ago, his wife had called him in the middle of the night, and he had been on a shift, and he hadn't answered. By morning, the ambulance had already come and gone. He would carry that silence for the rest of his life. He couldn't carry another one. Wade lifted Penny gently, her head falling against his shoulder, her breath warm on his neck. He grabbed his keys, his phone, his old work jacket. "Just one night," he said into the phone, not sure if he was promising her or warning himself. He walked out of the basement, past the humming boilers and the storage rooms full of cleaning supplies, and into the parking garage where his truck waited. It was a 15-year-old pickup with rust around the wheel wells and a passenger seat that smelled faintly of French fries. Not the kind of vehicle that belonged anywhere near the addresses Sloane Whitmore probably visited. But it ran. It always ran. Wade buckled Penny into the back seat, tucked a blanket around her, and pulled up the address on his phone. 30 minutes across town. A neighborhood where the houses had gates and the lawns had sprinkler systems, and people like him only showed up to fix things. The streets were quiet at this hour, empty except for the occasional taxi and the late-night buses running their final routes. Wade drove faster than he should have, his mind racing through possibilities. He didn't know who he was. A husband? A boyfriend? Someone dangerous enough to lock doors and pound on them when they stayed locked. He thought about calling the police, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the shame in her voice, the way she had whispered like she didn't want to be overheard. Maybe it was the knowledge that police didn't always make things better. Sometimes they made them worse. Sometimes they asked too many questions and did too little about the answers. Wade had seen it happen before. He had lived it in a way, watching his own mother navigate systems that promised help and delivered paperwork instead. He found the house at the end of a cul-de-sac, behind a wrought iron gate that stood open. The house itself was enormous, all white stone and tall windows, the kind of place that showed up in magazines. Every light was on, blazing into the night like a beacon. Wade parked at the curb, engine running, and scanned the property. No movement, no sound. He checked the address again, then sent a text. "I'm outside." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Corner of oak and birch, 200 meters from the house, behind the hedges. Wade felt his stomach drop. She wasn't inside anymore. She had gotten out, but she was hiding. He found her exactly where she said she would be, crouched behind a row of manicured bushes at the intersection of 2 quiet streets. Even in the darkness, he could see she was shivering. Her dress was thin, some silky thing meant for dinner parties, not for hiding in the cold. Her feet were bare, smudged with dirt and what looked like blood. She had climbed out a window, he realized, scraped herself on the way down. Sloane Whitmore, who wore heels that cost more than his monthly rent, was standing barefoot on a suburban sidewalk at midnight, looking at him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had turned to water. Wade didn't ask questions. He shrugged off his jacket, the old canvas one with the frayed cuffs, and held it out to her. She took it without speaking, wrapped it around her shoulders, and followed him to the truck. She stopped when she saw Penny asleep in the back seat, and for a moment something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or something softer. "Your daughter," she said. It wasn't a question. "Penny," Wade said. "She's 7. Sloane nodded slowly, like she was filing this information somewhere, adding it to a picture she was only beginning to see. She climbed into the passenger seat and pulled the jacket tighter. The truck smelled like French fries and motor oil, and she didn't seem to notice or care. They drove in silence for a while, the city lights sliding past the windows. Penny murmured in her sleep, something about stars and yellow windows. Wade kept his eyes on the road, waiting. He had learned a long time ago that silence was sometimes the only gift you could give someone. The space to breathe, the permission to speak or not speak. Sloane stared out the window at nothing, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "His name is Garrett. We're engaged. We're engaged. I don't know anymore." She paused. "I wanted to postpone the wedding. He didn't take it well." Wade said nothing. He said I needed to calm down, to think clearly. So he locked the bedroom door. "To give me time to rest," he said. She let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so broken. "He's done it before. Locked doors, taken my keys, checked my phone. I told myself it was because he loved me, because he worried." Her hands were shaking. Wade noticed she was still holding her phone. The screen cracked, like she had dropped it or thrown it. "Tonight I climbed out the window. I don't know why tonight was different. Maybe because the wedding is in 2 weeks, and I realized I couldn't breathe." Wade pulled into the parking lot of his apartment complex. It was nothing like the neighborhood they had just left. The building was old, brick facade stained with decades of city grime, the stairs creaking with every step. But the lights worked, the doors locked from the inside, and no one here would think to look for Sloane Whitmore. He carried Penny up 3 flights, Sloane following silently behind, and unlocked the door to apartment 3B. The living room was small, cluttered with Penny's toys and Wade's tools, but it was clean. It smelled like laundry detergent and the cookies Penny had helped him bake last weekend. On the refrigerator, a dozen drawings hung crooked, held up by magnets shaped like animals. Dad loves Penny. Penny loves Dad. Stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. Sloane stood in the middle of the room, like she didn't know where to put herself. Wade realized she had probably never been in an apartment like this. She owned buildings full of apartments, but she didn't live in them. She lived in penthouses with city views, places where the furniture came from catalogs and the art came from galleries. Here, the couch had a permanent dent from years of use. The coffee table had rings from cups placed without coasters. The lamp in the corner came from a thrift store and cost $8, but it gave good light. It had seen Penny through homework and bedtime stories and Saturday morning cartoons. It had seen Wade through long nights of grief, the months after his wife died, when he couldn't sleep and didn't know how to cry. That lamp knew things about him that Sloane Whitmore would never know. And somehow, that made it precious. Wade settled Penny into her bed, tucking the blankets around her, kissing her forehead. She was still clutching a crayon, and he gently pried it from her fingers and set it on the nightstand. When he came back out, Sloane was standing by the refrigerator, looking at Penny's drawings. Her face was unreadable. "She drew the building," Sloane said softly. "The one you work in." Wade nodded. "She thinks it's magical. All those lights, all those people." Sloane touched one of the drawings with her fingertip, tracing the tiny yellow squares. "I never thought of it that way." She turned to look at him, really look at him, for what felt like the first time. "What's your name?" "Your real name." Wade felt something shift in his chest. "Wade. Wade Hollis." She nodded slowly. "Wade. I'm sorry I never knew that." He made her tea in a chipped mug with a cartoon cat on it, the kind of thing you buy at a dollar store and keep forever, because it fits just right in your hand. She held it with both palms, like she was trying to absorb its warmth. Wade set up the sofa with clean sheets and an extra pillow, the one Penny had picked out because it had stars on it. "You can sleep here," he said. "Bathroom's down the hall. Towels are in the closet." Sloane looked at the sofa, at the starry pillow, at this stranger's home that had opened for her without question. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "I've never been kind to you. I didn't even know your name." Wade was quiet for a moment. Through the thin wall, they could hear Penny murmuring in her sleep, her voice rising and falling in the rhythms of a dream. 4 years ago, he said finally. My wife called me in the middle of the night. I was working a double shift. I didn't hear the phone. He paused. She didn't call anyone else. By the time I got home, it was too late. Sloane's breath caught. "I'm so sorry." Wade shook his head. "I'm not telling you this for sorry. I'm telling you because I made a promise after that. I promised I would never ignore a call for help again. Not ever. Even if I don't understand it. Even if I don't like the person calling." He met her eyes. "You called. I answered. That's all." He left her alone then, closing the door to his room softly, lying down beside the space where his wife used to sleep. He could hear Sloane crying through the wall, quiet sobs she probably thought he couldn't hear. He didn't go to her. Sometimes people needed to cry alone. Sometimes that was its own kind of healing. Wade stared at the ceiling and listened to the night sounds of the apartment, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of old pipes, the soft whisper of Penny's breath. He thought about locked doors, about the ones you choose and the ones that get chosen for you, about the keys you carry and the ones you lose. He fell asleep without answers, but for the first time in a long time, the questions didn't feel so heavy. Morning came with the smell of something burning. Wade's eyes snapped open, his body already moving before his mind caught up. He found Penny in the kitchen, standing on a step stool, a pan of blackened pancakes smoking on the stove. Sloane was beside her, looking helpless, in a way that seemed foreign on her face, like she had never seen a stove before. "We're making breakfast," Penny announced proudly, "for our guest." Wade turned off the burner, moved the pan to the sink, and looked at the mess of batter on the counter, the flour on the floor, the eggshells scattered like evidence of a very small crime. Penny beamed up at him, completely unaware that she had nearly set the kitchen on fire. Sloane looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her. "I tried to help," she said. "I've never actually made pancakes before." There was something so genuinely embarrassed about it, so human, that Wade felt himself smile despite everything. They ate the parts of the pancakes that weren't completely charred, sitting at the tiny kitchen table that only fit 3 chairs. Penny talked the entire time about her school and her best friend Rosie and the goldfish in her classroom that was named President because he looked important. Sloane listened with an intensity that surprised Wade. She asked questions. Real questions, not the polite kind adults usually asked children. What did President do all day? Did Penny think he got lonely? What would she name a goldfish if she had one? Penny considered each question seriously, giving answers that wandered through imagination and logic in equal measure. Wade watched them and felt something loosen in his chest. His daughter had this gift, the ability to see people not as they were supposed to be, but as they actually were. She didn't see a CEO or a rich woman or someone important. She just saw a lady with sad eyes who needed breakfast. After the meal, Sloane's phone began to buzz. She had charged it overnight, and now the screen filled with notifications, missed calls from Garrett, from her mother, from numbers she didn't recognize, text messages that started with, "Where are you?" and "I'm worried," and "Don't do anything stupid." She read them without expression, her face closing like a door. Wade didn't ask. Penny didn't notice. She was busy showing Sloane her drawings, spreading them across the table like treasure. "This is you," she said, pointing to a figure with yellow hair. "And this is my dad. And this is me. We're all together." Sloane looked at the drawing for a long moment. In it, 3 stick figures held hands under a sun that took up half the page. They were all smiling, those upturned crescent smiles that children draw, the kind that don't require any reason. "You put me in your picture," Sloane said quietly. "Because you were here," Penny said, like it was obvious. "You're part of the morning now." Wade went to work because he had to, because sick days cost money, and rent was due in 2 weeks. He left Sloane with Penny, a decision that surprised even him. But Penny had already adopted her, in that fierce way children sometimes did, and Sloane seemed different in the daylight. Smaller, somehow. Less like a CEO, and more like someone who had simply never learned how to be ordinary. "I'll be back by 5, Wade said. "There's food in the fridge. She likes to color after lunch." "Don't let her eat more than 2 cookies, or she'll bounce off the walls." Sloane nodded, looking at Penny like she was being handed something precious and fragile. "I'll take care of her," she said. And Wade believed her. The day passed in a strange blur. Penny taught Sloane to play tic-tac-toe, then checkers, then a game she made up on the spot involving stuffed animals and complicated rules that changed every few minutes. Sloane lost every round of everything and didn't seem to mind. They colored together, Penny explaining the correct way to fill in spaces, which was apparently very important. "You can't go outside the lines too much," she said seriously. "A little bit is okay because everyone makes mistakes, but if you try hard, it looks nicer." Sloane looked at her half-finished picture, crayon marks wandering over edges, and thought about all the lines she had been trying to stay inside her whole life. "What if I like it better messy?" she asked. Penny considered this. "Then it's art," she decided. "Art doesn't have rules." They colored in companionable silence after that, the afternoon sun streaming through the window, dust motes dancing in the light. Later, Penny showed her the photograph on the wall. A woman with dark hair and Wade's eyes, or maybe Wade had her eyes. It was hard to tell. "That's my mom," Penny said. "She went to live with the stars." Sloane felt her throat tighten. "That's a beautiful way to say it." Penny nodded, matter of fact. "Dad said she's always watching. That's why I draw so many stars in my pictures, so she can see them too." She pointed to a drawing on the refrigerator, one with yellow windows and a sky full of stars. "This one's her favorite, I think, because it has the most." Sloane didn't know what to say. She had lost people before, distant relatives, a grandmother she barely knew, but she had never lost someone who left a hole shaped like them in your life. She looked at this 7-year-old girl who spoke about death like it was just another part of the world, sad but not scary, and felt something crack open inside her. "Do you miss her?" Sloane asked. "Every day," Penny said. "But Dad says missing is just love with nowhere to go. So I try to give it somewhere, like drawing, or hugging Dad extra tight, or being nice to people who look sad." She looked up at Sloane. "You looked sad last night. Really sad. So I'm being extra nice to you." When Wade came home, he found them sitting on the kitchen floor surrounded by crayons, a half-finished drawing between them. Sloane had colors on her fingers, a streak of blue on her cheek that she clearly didn't know about. She was laughing at something Penny had said, a real laugh with sound in it, the kind that came from somewhere deep. Wade stood in the doorway and watched them for a moment, two people who had no business knowing each other, connected by accident and pancakes, and a night that should have ended differently. Penny spotted him first. "Dad, Sloane is really bad at drawing, but she's getting better." Sloane looked up, and for a second, something passed between her and Wade. Recognition, maybe. Or gratitude. Or something else entirely. Something neither of them had words for yet. "She's a patient teacher," Sloane said. "I have a lot to learn." Dinner was simple, pasta with sauce from a jar, but they ate it together at the small table. 3 people who fit into a space meant for exactly 3. Penny talked about everything and nothing, and Wade listened, and Sloane found herself laughing again, more than she had laughed in months. After dinner, Wade washed dishes and Sloane dried, a rhythm that felt natural despite being new. "I never learned to do this," she admitted, holding a plate like it might break. "We always had people." Wade handed her another plate. "Everyone can learn. It's just soap and water." She smiled, a small private thing. "You make it sound easy." "Dishes are easy," Wade said. "It's everything else that's hard." That night, after Penny was asleep, they sat on the small balcony that overlooked the parking lot. Not much of a view, but the sky was clear, and the stars were out. The same stars that supposedly held Wade's wife and Penny's mother. Sloane pulled Wade's old jacket tighter around her shoulders. She had been wearing it all day and hadn't thought to give it back. "I should leave tomorrow," she said. "Go back. Face everything." Wade nodded. "Where will you go?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. Not to Garrett. That's over. I think it was over a long time ago and I just didn't want to see it." She looked at her phone. Dark now, all those notifications silenced. My whole life was supposed to be figured out. The company, the wedding, the future. And now, none of it makes sense. Wade didn't offer solutions. He just sat beside her in the darkness, a steady presence. "You know what Penny asked me today," Sloane said. "She asked if my mom hugs me. I couldn't answer. I don't remember the last time my mother hugged me. It's always been air kisses and performance. I didn't know that was strange until today." Wade was quiet for a moment, looking at the stars. 4 years ago, when my wife died, I didn't know how to be a father alone. I still don't, most days. But Penny taught me something. She taught me that love isn't complicated. It's pancakes, even when they burn. It's drawings on the fridge. It's showing up. He turned to look at Sloane. "You showed up for yourself last night. That's harder than anything I've ever done." Sloane felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know who I am without all of it. The company, the name, the expectations." Wade shrugged. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe you get to find out." They sat in silence after that. 2 people on a tiny balcony, watching stars they couldn't name. Sloane thought about all the things she had been taught to want. The corner office, the right husband, the perfect life. None of it had made her happy. None of it had made her feel seen. But here, in a 3-room apartment with peeling paint and a 7-year-old's artwork on every wall, she felt something she couldn't name. Something like possibility. The next morning, Garrett arrived. Wade was making coffee when the knock came, sharp and impatient, the knock of someone who expected doors to open for them. He opened it to find a man in an expensive suit, flowers in one hand, smile already in place. "I'm looking for Sloane Whitmore," the man said. His eyes swept over Wade, over the apartment behind him, dismissing everything in a single glance. "She's my fiancée." Wade didn't move. "I'll get her." He left the door half open and went to the bedroom where Sloane was helping Penny pick out clothes for the day. "He's here," Wade said. That was all he needed to say. Sloane's face went still. Then she took a breath, squeezed Penny's hand, and walked out to meet her past. Garrett stood in the living room like he was contaminating himself just by being there. His eyes moved over the worn furniture, the children's drawings, the evidence of a life so different from his own that it might as well have been another planet. "Sloane," he said, and his voice was honey, sweet and practiced. "Baby, I've been so worried. Why didn't you answer your phone? I've been going crazy." He held out the flowers, red roses, perfect and expensive. "I'm sorry about the other night. I overreacted. I just love you so much. I can't stand the thought of losing you." Sloane looked at him, really looked, maybe for the first time. She saw the suit and the flowers and the careful words, and she saw something else too. The way he hadn't asked if she was okay, the way he had found her, tracked her somehow, invaded this space without permission, the way his eyes kept sliding to Wade with something cold underneath the charm. "Come home," Garrett said. "This isn't where you belong. We can talk about the wedding, postpone if you need to, but not here. Not like this." For one terrible moment, Sloane felt herself wavering. This was the life she knew. The script she had been following for 27 years. The path of least resistance. Garrett reached for her hand, and his touch was familiar, and familiar was so much easier than unknown. Then Penny ran out from the bedroom, a piece of paper in her hand. "Co Sloane, I made you another picture." She held it up proudly, a crayon drawing of 3 figures, a tall one, a medium one, and a small one, all holding hands. Above them, in wobbly letters, she had written "Fanily." Not family. Fanily. Because she was 7 and spelling was hard, and love didn't need to be spelled right to be real. Garrett barely glanced at the child. "That's sweet, honey," he said. his voice patient in the way adults were patient with things that didn't matter. But the grown-ups are talking. He put his hand on Penny's shoulder, moving her gently but firmly aside. Wade stepped forward then, quiet but unmovable, placing himself between Garrett and his daughter. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Penny pressed against his leg, confused, her smile fading. And Sloane saw it, clear as daylight. The way Garrett dismissed what didn't serve him. The way he made people feel small without ever raising his voice. She had felt it 1,000 times and called it something else. Protection, concern, love. But it wasn't love. Love didn't push aside children. Love didn't lock doors. Love didn't make you feel like you were disappearing. "I'm not coming with you," Sloane said. Her voice was steady in a way it hadn't been in years. Garrett's smile flickered. "Sloane, you're being emotional. This place, these people, they're not your world. Think about your father. Think about the company. Think about us." But Wade had stepped back, Penny in his arms now, and he was looking at Sloane with something that wasn't hope or expectation. It was simpler than that. It was trust. "You don't owe anyone an explanation," he said, "including me." Then he took Penny into her bedroom and closed the door, leaving Sloane alone with her choice. Penny pushed the drawing into Sloane's hand before she disappeared. "Keep it," she whispered. "So you remember how you smiled." Sloane looked at the paper, at the 3 figures, at the misspelled word that meant more than any correctly spelled word ever had. She folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. Then she looked at Garrett, at his perfect suit, and his perfect flowers, and his perfect lie of a life, and she made a choice. "Goodbye, Garrett," she said, and she walked past him, out of the apartment, down the stairs. She got into his car because that was what he expected, and for 1 block, she let him believe he had won. He talked the whole time, about the wedding, about how they could work through this, about how much he needed her. His hand found her thigh, the way it always did, proprietary and sure. The light turned red. The car stopped, and Sloane opened the door and stepped out onto the street. "What are you doing?" Garrett's voice finally cracked, the honey dissolving into something sharp. "Get back in the car! Sloane! Sloane!" But she was already walking, not running, just walking with steps that felt for the first time like they belonged to her. Behind her, the light turned green, and horns blared, and Garrett had to drive because that was what traffic demanded. She didn't look back. She kept walking until the sound of his voice faded, until there was only the city around her, loud and indifferent and free. She didn't go back to Wade's apartment. She called her father from a park bench, sitting alone with pigeons and strangers, and told him she wasn't marrying Garrett. The silence that followed was longer than any silence she had ever heard. "You're making a mistake," he said finally. "The contracts, the partnerships, everything we've built." Sloane watched a child chase a pigeon across the path, laughing. "I understand," she said, "and I'm still not marrying him." The call ended. She sat there for a long time after, feeling the weight of everything she had just walked away from. The company, the inheritance, the future that had been mapped out since before she could walk. It should have felt like falling. Instead, it felt like breathing. She rented a studio apartment with her own savings, the money she had set aside over years of bonuses and forgotten accounts. It was small and plain, and hers. She learned to do laundry, colors bleeding together the first few times until she figured out the sorting. She learned to cook, burning more meals than she succeeded at, eating toast and eggs when everything else failed. She learned to be alone, to sit in silence without reaching for her phone, to wake up without a schedule dictating her first thought. Some nights she cried. Some mornings she didn't want to get up. But she got up anyway, and that was something. That was everything. A month passed, then another. She found a rhythm in her small life, a peace she hadn't known existed. She walked every morning, no destination, just movement. She read books she had always meant to read. She sat in coffee shops and watched people, wondering about their stories, realizing for the first time that everyone had one. One afternoon, a package arrived at her apartment. No return address. Inside, wrapped in brown paper, was a small wooden star, hand-carved, smooth to the touch, smelling faintly of sawdust. She knew immediately who had made it. She had seen one just like it hanging above Penny's bed. "Dad made it for me," Penny had said, "so I won't be scared of the dark." Sloane put the star on her windowsill, where the morning sun could find it. She didn't need it to stop being scared. She needed it to remember that she had already stopped. 3 months later, she opened a coffee shop. It was small, tucked into an alley that most people walked past without noticing, but she had fallen in love with its brick walls and big windows and the way light fell through them in the afternoons. She named it Yellow Windows, though she never explained why. The menu was simple. The furniture was mismatched. The art on the walls came from local artists who needed a place to hang their work. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't supposed to be. The first week was slow. The second week was slower. She stood behind the counter most days, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake, if freedom was just another word for failure. Then, on a Thursday morning, the door chimed and Penny burst through, running straight into Sloane's arms. "Co Sloane, Dad found your shop. He said the coffee smells like the good kind." Wade stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, looking around at the exposed brick and the mismatched chairs and the paintings by local artists that Sloane had hung because she liked them, not because they matched. On the wall behind the counter, framed in simple wood, was Penny's drawing. 3 figures holding hands. Fanily. Wade saw it, and something moved across his face. "Nice place," he said. "You did good." Sloane smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes. "I had good teachers." She made them coffee, a latte for Wade, and hot chocolate for Penny, with extra whipped cream because some things required extra. They sat at a table by the window, the morning light falling across their faces, and talked about nothing important. Penny showed off a scarf she had knitted, lumpy and uneven, and clearly made with love. "It's for you," she said, handing it to Sloane. "I made one for Dad, and one for me, and one for you. So we match." Sloane took the scarf like it was made of gold. "Thank you," she said, and her voice caught on the words. Wade watched her, this woman who had once signed his paychecks without knowing his name. Now, holding a child's crooked scarf like it was the most precious thing she had ever received. "Why did you come get me that night?" she asked suddenly. "I never treated you well. I didn't even know who you were." Wade looked into his coffee for a long moment. "Because I know what it's like to call and have no one answer," he said finally, "and because I think everyone deserves someone who'll open the door for them, at least once." They sat in comfortable silence after that, the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. Penny drew pictures on napkins. Wade drank his coffee slowly, in no hurry to leave. And Sloane thought about doors, the ones that get locked and the ones that stay open, the ones you're born behind and the ones you build yourself. She had spent her whole life in rooms with expensive locks, surrounded by people who held keys she never asked for. Now she stood behind a counter in a shop she had built with her own hands, pouring coffee for a man who had answered her call when he had every reason not to. "The shop closes at 7, she said, trying to sound casual and failing completely. "I can make pasta now. Not restaurant quality, but it doesn't burn anymore." Wade looked at Penny, who nodded so hard her whole body shook. "Penny likes pasta," he said, then softer. "So do I." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a declaration. It was just a door, opening. And that was enough. Sloane watched them leave, Penny skipping ahead, Wade following with his steady walk. At the corner, Penny turned and waved, her smile visible even from a distance. Wade raised a hand, a simple gesture, a goodbye that felt like a hello. Through the window of her shop, Sloane could see the street outside, the people walking past, the ordinary miracle of a regular morning. 3 months ago, she had stood in a penthouse 34 floors above the city, looking down at lights that meant nothing, drowning in a silence no one else could hear. Now she stood in a coffee shop in an alley, aprons stained with espresso, hands rough from work, heart fuller than she had ever known it could be. The door was hers. The key was hers. And finally, she understood. Home isn't where the doors lock or unlock. Home is where you hold your own key and choose who gets to walk through. She turned back to the counter, ready for the next customer, ready for whatever came next. On her windowsill at home, a wooden star caught the light. On her wall, 3 stick figures held hands forever. And somewhere across the city, a 7-year-old girl was telling her father about a lady who had learned to smile again. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. But for the first time in her life, Sloane was the one writing it, and that made all the difference.